starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Our story today was written by Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich. Driving along a commercial corridor near my house, I noticed that one of the used car dealerships had changed the message on its sign. Instead of touting a holiday sale or good financing rates, the block letters read, "Honk if you love." I was thoroughly delighted. I remembered how encouraging it felt whenever drivers beeped their support as they passed a demonstration or protest march that I was part of. It felt like this message addressed those actions' deeper motivation: love our fellow human beings, which sits at the core of all justice work. I imagined cars whizzing past this roadside pulpit of sorts, people smiling as they tooted their horn on behalf of humanity. Cue the abrupt record scratch. As I drew closer to the sign, I noticed that under the word love was an American flag, previously undistinguishable. Apparently, boisterous love was reserved only for the United States. Suddenly, the acknowledgement of our wide and profound connectedness had been reduced to affection for one narrow sliver of the human population. I felt diminished. I'm better off taking my cue from Canada geese than used car dealers. Geese fly much further as a group than they ever could alone. When a goose has been injured, 2 or 3 others stay with it on the ground until it recuperates. And as the skein migrates, they honk to remind their fellow birds that they're nearby, ready to help, encouraging each other through the long hours of flight. If we have as much sense as geese, says Dr. Robert McNeish wrote, then our hearts must be moved by more than parochial interests. If we hope to foster a more compassionate world, we must practice caring for one another with joy and over long distances. If justice is to be realized, then our voices must speak loudly, even boisterously, of love.
Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now, my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now, my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Joseph Donatone, and it is an honor to serve the members of East Shore Unitarian Universalist Church in Kirtland, Ohio, and anyone else who may be joining us from wherever you found this video. Whoever you are, whatever brought you here, know that here you are loved and lovable. Here you are accepted and acceptable. Welcome. Now, so many Unitarian Universalists will say things like, I'm a first principle UU, or I'm a seventh principle UU. Historically, those are the very sexy principles that do some heavy lifting in our movement. The first principle tells us that everyone matters. The seventh principle reminds us that everything matters because it's all interconnected. And when we put these two particular principles together, we have a sort of shorthand theology that we can apply to almost everything we do in our congregation. These heavy hitters tend to get all of the glory within our movement. But 1 in 7, that's just 2 of the 7. What do we do with the rest of them? 2, 3, 5, 6, they all deserve our attention. And today, I want to explore one of the middle principles, the 6th. It reads, we, the member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Now, on the surface, this principle sounds very, very simple. It's so in line with the rest of our values that it seems almost like a gimme. Of course, a love-motivated movement that celebrates every single person and the interconnections that hold us all together will certainly champion peace, liberty, and justice for all. And for many of us, these words might sound a little familiar. Any public school student since the 60s has recited with liberty and justice for all almost every morning of their school year. Now, some of us skim over this principle because it sounds too much like the Pledge of Allegiance, and compulsory recitation of the pledge is emblematic of nationalism and conformity. The practice calls into question the role of government in our lives. And I hear you. I hear you, and I honor the continued struggle some of you have and feel toward these words and how these words ring within our 6th principle. But our 6th principle isn't the Pledge of Allegiance. It speaks to our values as Unitarian Universalists year after year. And I believe it is one of the principles that help us truly widen our circle. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Now, unfortunately, we live in a broken world where these blessings are not guaranteed to all people. All too often, nations fight to define and redefine borders at the expense of peace. Corporate freedoms suppress personal liberty, and maintaining a system of oppression favoring a small collection of the elite denies justice for everyone else. Now, I want to pull our exploration out of the realm of ideas and theories for a minute and into the real world. Now, having lived in Florida for quite some time, I'm going to use Florida as an example. The Florida governor has two favorite targets: immigration and education. In the past 6 months alone, he has led the Florida legislature to pass increasingly restrictive and punitive immigration laws. In his most recent effort, a bill would require the Florida Highway Patrol to take on ICE responsibilities and interrogate anyone they even suspect is undocumented. Think about that for a minute. Being pulled over by the Highway Patrol because of the suspicion you might be undocumented. In another series of bills and executive orders, the Florida Department of Education has been mandated to revamp the state government and civics curriculum. High school government courses will include state-mandated discussion of political ideologies, including, quote, evils of communism and totalitarianism. Now that, for some of you, might sound pretty familiar if you lived through the Red Scare of the 50s. Now, additionally, at the governor's request, the Board of Education voted to prohibit schools from teaching critical race theory because it, quote, teaches kids to hate our country, end quote. And it's not just Florida. The Catholic Legal Immigration Network Incorporated, CLINIC, tracks legislation nationally. Following the presidential election of 2020, they predicted a backlash in conservative states and localities retaliating against potential pro-immigration rights policies that would be coming at the federal level. So states were anticipating federal changes to the immigration law. And they write, generally speaking, we saw a wave of conservative and anti-rights states legislation in 2021. These included proposals to limit the right to vote, proposals targeting transgender youth, retaliatory measures for Black Lives Matter demonstrators, and 8 states passed legislation banning education on critical race theory, including any classroom discussions about conscious and unconscious bias, privilege, discrimination, and oppression. They go on. The general anti-rights trend certainly carried through to legislation proposed on immigration this year. Many states proposed legislation that would force collaborations with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and Customs and Border Protection on immigration detainer requests, bolstering funding for border security, increasing surveillance of immigrants, adopting e-verify laws, and more. From January through August of 2021 alone, CLINIC tracked 417 pieces of legislation. Education Week reports, in at least 10 states, legislators have proposed bills that would require administrators to list every book, reading, and activity that teachers use in their lessons, a process that educators argue would be cumbersome and expensive. Some of these bills also require districts to give parents prior right of review for new curriculum adoptions or library additions, end quote. These restrictive, nationalist, and exclusionary pressures seek to continually narrow our focus. These pressures call for exclusion, to exclude immigrants, to exclude liberal ideas, and exclude challenges to the status quo. These efforts run contrary to the liberal and progressive ideals that we Unitarian Universalists hold up. And our sixth principle reminds us of that. So how exactly do we affirm and promote a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all people? In 1968, a Brazilian activist named Paulo Freire wrote a book titled Pedagogy of the Oppressed. As an educator, he looked at these same challenges rather, through the lens of his classroom. Many of these current efforts to narrow our focus, specifically this recent epidemic of book banning, target educational spaces. So it seems like including a revolutionary educator in today's talk might be pretty fitting. Freire was a proponent of something called dialectics. Dialectics explores the relationship between seemingly opposite things. So here I'm thinking about community and individuality. A dialectic understanding of these two concepts suggests that one cannot exist without the other. For example, think night and day. The existence of one affirms the existence of the other. Dialectic concepts are also always in dialogue with each other. So without night, there is no day. Without community, there is no concept of an individual. And that can seem like a bit of a paradox. If we didn't simultaneously have an awareness of the larger world we all live in, we wouldn't be able to define ideas like us and them. To deny our membership in the larger whole of humanity gives us nothing to define ourselves against. I'm an individual, a unique and discrete unit of what? I'm an individual within a pool of similar objects, a pool of similar humans. You might call it, I don't know, humanity. Without humanity, no one has a reason to differentiate an individual identity. Now, nationalist immigration policies try to disregard the rest of the globe. Exclusionary educational policies try to ignore the experiences of the marginalized. They seek to put so much distance between the two halves of the dialectic, America and the immigrant, standard curriculum and radical ideas, the oppressor and the oppressed, us and them, with the hope that the dialectic connection will break altogether. It cannot. So again, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all people. We live in an increasingly globalized world. Now, the same people calling out to close our borders reap the benefits of a global marketplace that makes some of them rich and keeps the cost of goods low for everyone else. So we all, in some way or another, benefit from globalization because we can buy more stuff. And the people wanting to close the borders know that. So when the alarm bell rings to close our borders, the call is really just to close our borders to people. We don't want to stop all that good, cheap stuff coming in. We don't want to pay more for any of our groceries. The point of closing the border is just to keep people out. Now, the justification for this alarm is total hypocrisy. Nationalists preach a false doctrine of scarcity. We don't have enough jobs. We don't have enough resources to support more people. We don't have enough space to put them. These are utter lies and nonsense. We have plenty of resources. The only thing we lack is a willingness to share. Wealth inequality is real. Greed is real. Scarcity is an illusion. It's good marketing. Globalization comes at a price. Each stage of this globalized process of creating cheaper and cheaper goods takes advantage of someone somewhere. Manufacturing waste gets dumped on developing nations. Global climate change at the hands of major industrial polluters destroys the homes of indigenous people across the globe. Corporations move manufacturing to countries where labor laws are lax, and companies can exploit workers. Vital resources like water are diverted for industrial agriculture upstream, creating scarcity, fear, and political unrest for communities downstream. Governments wage wars for oil rights to continue this cheap oil flowing, oil that's needed to ship all these cheap goods several times around the world. So governments bend to the will of corporations, twisting in knots to keep the global marketplace running, regardless of the people exploited in the process. And everyone sitting in this room today, everyone watching this video, benefits from that exploitation several dozen times a day. And that's really uncomfortable to sit with. So confronting these truths is a tough task. The easy thing to do would be to find a distraction, a patsy, someone else to blame. The easy thing is to lean into the opium of nationalism and say, well, that's not my problem. We need our quality of life. They need to make better decisions about themselves. America stands on proud, noble values. They are other. They are lesser. They just don't get it. Just look how they live. They're not like us. We are the United States of America. They are just backward third world nations. That's where this leads. Utter dehumanization. And it's because dehumanization is the only way to solve that paradox. Othering and dehumanization lets us stretch the dialectic so far that people we hurt aren't even people in our minds anymore. It allows us to imagine they are so different that they aren't part of our humanity. Honk if you love ... America. Friends, this is the reason that I am passionate about our sixth principle. It imagines a world where we have solved so many of these problems, a world where we strive to promote peace, liberty, and justice for all. Our sixth principle imagines a world where we are all in this together. And I see opportunity as we unpack these ideas: world community, peace, liberty, justice. Let's return to Paulo Freire for a moment. His philosophy gives us this: oppressors seek to dehumanize those they oppress. Liberation from oppression is a humanizing process. And the key to liberation is education. Effective education relies on the co-creation of meaning between the teacher and student. When we're thinking about how we might go about affirming world community with peace, justice, and liberty, we might begin to think about this teacher-student model. But instead, we might replace teacher with privileged and student with disadvantaged. Freire hated the notion that a teacher might stand in front of the class and pour knowledge into these little empty vessels that were their students. This hierarchical model dehumanized the student by not valuing the insight, awareness, and lived experiences the students brought to the classroom. It made them receptive objects. In his ideal, the teacher has as much to learn from the student, and the student as the student could possibly learn from the teacher. So let's again replace teacher and student. The privileged have as much to gain from the disadvantaged as the disadvantaged have to gain from the privileged. When we work outside the bounds of oppressive programming that says otherwise, we can begin to discover truths and create meaning together. Now, when you find an opportunity, how do you want to promote and affirm global community, peace, justice, and liberty? Will you write a check? Or will you do more? Now, I'm not saying don't write checks. Write the checks. If you can afford to write a check, write a check. Nonprofit organizations need those checks. But could you do more? Could you write a check and show up as a volunteer? Could you write a check and call up your state representative? Could you write a check and mentor a child or offer to drive someone to a court date? Exploring our 7 principles and challenging our individual values is akin to writing the check. It's necessary work. By informing ourselves and challenging ourselves to grow, we affirm the covenant we make with each other as Unitarian Universalists to affirm these values. But let us widen our focus. The stretch, the spiritual growth, and deeper meaning making comes when we carry these values into the world and dive into the hands-on work of making change. In those moments on the soup line or seated around a table stuffing envelopes, we have the opportunity to engage with others aligned with the cause, and we become true allies to those seeking liberation. In these moments, we can share and learn from one another. In these moments, we can meet those we help to help face to face. We can hear their stories. We can learn from their lived experiences and better understand the challenge at hand. We can affirm and honor the humanity of those we seek to help, and thereby affirm and celebrate the humanity within ourselves. That's how we build community. That's how we get to the peace, justice, and liberation. The imagined borders fade. Concepts of us and them soon failed to define us, giving way to the reality of we. May it be so, and amen.
there are a lot of things that we can do to be a part of that world community. But as Reverend Joe said, if you can, write the check and send it into the office at East Shore to fulfill your pledge this month, or just because you have a little bit of extra lying around that you want to help us share with our community. Thank you so much.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can
Friends, as our time together draws to a close, and we begin to think about moving away from this time and place out into the world, I implore you, do not leave your values behind. Carry them with you. Carry them into the world so that as you honor the humanity and those you find, you also find a celebration of the humanity within yourself. Go now in peace.
Would you join me in reciting the Bond of Union? Awesome. We join hands in Unitarian Universalist fellowship, pledging ourselves to an individual religious freedom which transcends all creeds, not to think alike, but to journey together. Awesome.